Hi and welcome to Different Leaf, a show for new and experienced cannabis consumers. I'm Brit Smith. Do you ever think about how long the underground cannabis economy was thriving before states started to allow legal weed shops? Like, what did the person who sold you weed in high school have to endure if they got locked up for providing you that service? Before we all went, that's not a bad idea. Before society widely agreed that what they were doing wasn't really a crime after all, and was actually a potentially booming health industry with space for luxury rooftop parties, pre-rolls, and designer roach clips. Well, before legalization, the cannabis economy was kept alive and run by underground growers, transporters, and sellers, many of whom were black and brown entrepreneurial-minded men, stuck in a cycle of poverty, who saw a supply and demand issue with weed and tried to fulfill it to make a better life for themselves. Now, white communities in America have also long bought and sold drugs at the same, if not a higher rate than communities of color. But due to the US government's racist war on drugs policy, black and brown communities were the targets of much, much higher rates of policing for decades. And millions of those legacy market CEOs of color got locked up for providing the same cannabis delivery service we can now all order via an app. An app that was most likely founded by a group of rich white men who loved cannabis in high school, but they never had their records tainted. According to the Human Rights Watch, today the impact of that war on drugs policy means that 1 in every 20 black men over the age of 18 is in state or federal prison, and that's compared to 1 in every 180 white men. And as the legal cannabis economy continues to grow, that translates into far less people of color who have deep experience with the plant being able to enter the legal market, despite being the ones who founded it before it was cool. Thankfully, many of those legacy entrepreneurs and allies have been banding together over the years as their states legalize weed, and they've been fighting for social equity laws. Those laws mean that in states like Massachusetts and New York, people who were formerly incarcerated for selling weed are now able to get assistance to enter the legal market first, so they can get back to being behind the wheel of their economy, and we can go back to supporting our local dealers who got unjustly locked up all those years ago. So what is life like now for legacy dealers who can actually bring legal weed shops to their neighborhoods? What did they have to build and go through to get us cannabis before there was a legal market? And where can we shop now to put our money back into those who were hurt the most by the war on drugs? Our guest this episode is Coss Marte, former drug kingpin from New York's Lower East Side, who is now the CEO of CONBUD, New York City's first dispensaries that will soon be staffed entirely by formerly incarcerated people. Like many entrepreneurs who grew up in poverty, Coss saw that there was a supply and demand issue back in the late 90s, and through his family network he started hustling and selling drugs. At first it was just to friends, but eventually he was running a massive multi-million-dollar network of delivery drivers all across New York City. Coss was arrested for the 9th time in 2009 and put away in New York's notorious Rikers Island prison for 7 years. As an entrepreneur at heart, he kept dealing while he was inside, for which he endured solitary confinement, and he got a lot fitter. He lost 70 pounds, and he helped 20 other inmates get in shape as well. When he got out, Coss continued with that CEO mindset, and he set up CONBUD, a fitness regime that got New Yorkers into shape just like they do in prison. Over the last few years, he's been working on his next venture, CONBUD. He's getting back into his original career of providing cannabis to his community. But this time, thanks to New York's social equity laws, the government has actually given him the go-ahead. Coss has 2 CONBUD stores that are set to open at the end of summer 23, one on the Lower East Side and one in the Bronx. And not only is he returning to where he first started his work, Coss is also bringing legacy strains that he used to see in high demand back to his neighborhood. We'll be right back to chat about legacy market entrepreneurship with Coss Marte. Where did you start out in life? What neighborhood is yours? And let's talk about your first experience with weed.
Yeah, so my name is Coss Marte. I'm born and raised on the Lower East Side of New York City. The Lower East Side was a very heavily drug-infested neighborhood when I was growing up. My mom came when she was pregnant with me to this neighborhood, And we ended up here where I was exposed to drugs at my earliest memories, just people addicted to heroin, smoking weed in the staircase, and those were like my first experiences with drugs, maybe 2, 3 years old, remembering those scenes happening all the time. And then on the weed side and how I got involved with weed. So I had my family at that time lived in the whole same floor. New York City, we have apartment buildings, there's usually 3 to 5 apartments in each floor in a huge building. In the old school tenement buildings, there were about 5 apartments on each floor. And all the people that were my neighbors were my cousins.
Wow.
The first, second, third cousins, they were all related to me. All the stuff next to me. Sorry, the noise.
That's okay. The sounds of New York, right?
Yeah.
Sets the scene. It's all right.
Yeah, very traffic neighborhood. But I grew up in that scene, and my older cousins were already smoking. I started getting intrigued when I was probably like 9, 10 years old, and I really started smoking at 11. Mm-hmm. And from there, I loved it. I loved just sneaking around, smoking. And I remember, being that kid going to junior high, and I was like the kid that was high.
Yeah.
At the time, they used to call me Smokey the Bear. But everybody came up to me, giving me $1 each, to go buy a nickel bag down the block. Mm. My cousin was the one selling it, so I was buying the nickels off of him. I'm the one rolling it for people, and it became like a supply and demand with me being like sent to the block to get it and then bringing it back to kids at school. And eventually I became that dealer. I became that individual that was like, I told my cousin, give me an ounce, and I started bagging it up, and I bagged up a whole bunch of nickel bags. And
you're like a young entrepreneur. Like, you saw a demand for something and you had the supply for it, and you sort of took initiative. Like, I remember doing that same kind of thing, but with candy as a kid. Yeah. It's just the substance that I was pushing on the playground. Luckily for me, it was not illegal. So what was your first run-in with the cops over drugs?
My first run-in was when I was 13 years old, and I was arrested for 2 nickel bags. So basically, I had a beeper at that time. I was running around in the streets thinking I'm something big.
A beeper? Oh, my God.
I remember getting a beep, and I called back the number, and it was my boy. He wanted, a couple bags. So I went downstairs to go meet him by the park, and we walked, and I sold him the bags, and he was like, hey, do you want to smoke? And I was like, yeah. And so, I started rolling up a blunt. And as I was rolling, he started smoking, and I passed him back the blunt. He passed it back to me. And unfortunately, they grabbed me up behind me in the park and threw me down to the ground. And I was there with my 9-year-old brother and my 8-year-old cousin, walking with me. My little brother was scared as hell. He started crying. He started begging to let me go. They arrested me, and they gave me a slap on the wrist. I got charged for whatever, just possession, and let go. And that was it. That was my first arrest.
And how did it go from there once you were given that slap on the wrist? Did it deter you from your entrepreneurial endeavors, I guess?
No, I was like, I could get away with anything. I was like, I got caught because I was not moving too slick enough. And so that was my mentality. It was like, I need to find a better stash spot. I need to do this, more carefully, or, I need to maneuver the system a little bit more, so I won't have to go through that situation again. And so that was always my mentality every time I got arrested, and I got arrested 9, 10 times.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So at what point did you end up in prison for like 7 years?
So that the last time I went into prison, I was 23 years old. I was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and I started a whole delivery service. And so from a beeper to probably StarTech and Nokia cell phones back then in the late 90s and early 2000s to moving on to Nextels and getting people to, do deliveries with me on bicycles. And then from bicycles, I had a whole fleet of cars, and we were generating about $5 million in revenue a year through our service. And then it was a crazy system. And, at one point we had about 20 something drivers, 2 different shifts, two
Oh
different
my,
dispatchers.
oh my God, there's a whole little business going on.
Yeah, it was a very lucrative business. And when I got caught, the Fed, they turned it into a state case, but the Drug Enforcement Agency, they said it was one of the most significant cases that they've seen because everybody at that time was, back in the day, everybody had a corner. You sat on a milk crate, you sold drugs on your corner. There was no real sophisticated delivery system. And so when they brought me down and they saw how complex and sophisticated the system was, and I had everybody driving for me wear business suits and ties and, look like they were going to Wall Street, and so, then I had a whole fleet of vehicles that I was getting from like a crazy discounted rental spot because I was getting manipulating fraudulent like not QR codes, but promo codes. And so I was getting super discounted vehicles, switching them every week or so, so,
Wow, like you really, you really learned from that first time to building it up to this like enterprise. So what were the charges that were brought against you?
They tried to charge me with Kingpin status. I got caught not only with 5 pounds of sour diesel, that old school sour diesel, but I also got caught with a kilo and a half of coke. And so that got me to 7 years. Yeah, I mean, it went down as a conspiracy, a whole bunch of sales, undercover sales. I had a whole set of charges on me.
Wow, that must have been a very stressful period of your life. You'd come so far, essentially, in the business that you'd chosen, and then it was...
And it didn't stop there. As soon as I got locked up, I started sneaking in weed in there. And
I've always wondered this. How in the world do you get it in?
You put it in your prison pocket.
Prison pocket? You got pockets? In your orange jumpsuits?
Put it up in your butthole.
Oh, that's a prison pocket. Oh, oh man.
So
where are you going to be dedicated? Wow.
Yeah, no, I would put Vaseline behind my ear. And so I would put Vaseline in the loonie. I would roll it up on my sleeve right here in the jumpsuit.
Yeah.
And so I would go in when I'm about to get searched and everybody's visit in that section. So we're all going together. And as soon as they open that door and they're going through the next door, we're all locked in this room and we're going one at a time or 3 at a time to get searched. And so in that room is where I'm taking off my jumpsuit and I just stash it real quick.
Wow. I mean, that's real dedication, but you were running the same sort of enterprise inside.
No, I was not doing a delivery services.
You weren't delivering to cells.
Yeah, but it was a delivery system a little bit. You had a fishing system. The way we fished was basically grabbing string, tying it up, and then flinging it from one cell to the other, from under the cells,
Yeah.
So that, during lockdown period, that's how we passed things over. The way we received money was through like Western Union type of stuff or cash. If anybody snuck in cash inside the system, that's how it went down while we was locked up. And I was smoking so much. I was probably smoking 20 blunts and joints a day while I was incarcerated.
How in the heck do you get away with that? How does nobody smell it? Or do they just not care?
With certain units in Rikers Island, you get great officers that turn a blind eye. There's other units where you get these like picky officers that want to come after you. And,
yeah.
That's you. The way I got away with drug tests was another complicated.
Oh, yeah. So they have to test you every week in there?
Randomly, not. It's just like they smell weed around. They're going to grab the people that they think that they're smoking, or somebody snitches on you and they say like, hey, you're the one smoking, blah, blah, blah. So I would always have like clean urine. I would pay for an inmate to give me clean urine. I would have it in this like, the nasal bottles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, we used to use the nasal bottles for like perfume to spray while we smoking so it doesn't come out too much. And it was very complicated because you would have to keep it body warm temperature. And so I would keep it in my underwear just in case I got pulled down for a urine test at all times.
Man, you get so inventive, right? It's like survival of the fittest. Like you got to figure out how to carry on, and you just sort of work it out as you're in there.
People don't understand what this plant, cannabis, and the things that we had to go through. I feel like the next generation is not going to feel that.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I ended up in solitary confinement for a 24-hour lockdown and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Did you find that the weed that you were able to smoke inside there gave you some relief at least, because it's just you're stuck there for 7 years?
Absolutely. I mean, I was my favorite hobby while I was in there was besides working out was playing dominoes and smoking weed. So.
Yeah, I bet it makes some of that sort of sorrow, some of that boredom just a little bit easier to deal with, and a bit more present, especially with your game of dominoes. That's fun. Apart from the impact on you and mentally in solitary confinement, there's also that impact on your family and your life outside. What was it like for you to be inside and knowing that the world outside was carrying on and that legalization was happening while you were in there?
Yeah, I mean, it was wild. But legalization, how long has it been legal?
It was first in 2012 in California, probably significantly in 2015. So as you were getting out, it was really coming around other states.
Yeah, I came home 2013, and that's when I felt the shock of this is wild. People could smoke. And I was afraid. I was clean for the first 2.5 years when I came home because I was afraid of parole. I was on a very, very strict parole that they were urine testing me once a week. And I'd rather stop than deal with the situation of dealing with a dirty urine. I'm spending 2 more years upstate, because of that dirty urine. It was just not worth it at the time. But as soon as I got off parole, I lit a fat one.
Get it? Yes. Finally, right? Re-entering civilization after you've been in prison for so long is one thing, but not only did you re-enter civilization and the new world that was around you with weed, but you started with CONBUD, which was a fitness studio where you worked out like a convict does. You were getting yelled at, and I think I'd find that pretty motivational. But, after that, now you're moving into cannabis, the legal scene of cannabis in New York. First of all, why did you want to enter the legal side of the industry that you had essentially already figured out 10 years earlier?
Well, when Massachusetts happened before New York, and I think it was 2017. I was getting notoriety for my gym and the criminal justice work that I've been doing for a very long time. And then I got an offer from one of my good friends who got a license in Massachusetts. And so my friend from Mass, he used to buy weed off of me. I used to go, he lived in Rhode Island at the time, and I was bringing stuff over there. And so he was following my journey on creating the company CONBUD at the time. And he asked me, he's like, hey, yo, I know you know how to sell weed better than me. Do you want to run my company? And so he basically offered me a CEO job. And I was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. I think I could run both companies. And so
what was the company in Mass? I'm in Mass, so I might know it.
The one in Four Rivers that went down with the whole gossip.
That's such a shame.
And so thank God I didn't go down and become the CEO at the time, because I might have got caught up with some crazy shit back then. But I was also denied to work there because of my criminal record. He got one of the first licenses in the state of Massachusetts. So I was not able to work there because of my criminal background. And then I started speaking on panels in New York City about it, talking about legalization in New York, and following the whole, this was 2016 when I started talking on panels about it. We just thought that things were going to be legalized way before. And then eventually during the pandemic, that's when things happened. We thought it was going to happen 2020, and then it happened 2021. And it was a big victory. When that happened, the city went crazy. And then I was just following the MRTA and following the rules behind it and just seeing that I qualified when they released the card program, the conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. I felt like they wrote it specifically for me, for somebody that ran a successful business in the past and also has the conviction for cannabis. A lot of people, they're like, oh, but you also sold coke too. I was like, hey, if you're from New York City and somebody asks you for something and you're from the hood, you're going to figure it out and get it to them as long as you get a profit margin,
Right.
And that was my mentality. But the only way I qualified was not because of that 7-year charge. That would have disqualified me if I would have submitted it in my application. I actually did 2 other years besides one for cannabis and one for violating probation. And so for selling weed. And so that qualified me and a couple other convictions that I got caught, like smoking in the streets and, and things like that. And so I got in and applied and I was super excited. I felt like I was going to be one of the first ones because, I was speaking on panels with the government about it and the OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management in New York City and New York State, they knew me. And so I was like, you check my application. And then when they first announced that first round of licensees and I didn't get it, I was extremely disappointed and discouraged. But I was like, I'm just going to wait. And then it get announced in the second round. And then I waited and finally got it on the third round. But right now I'm moving faster than a lot of people that got it in the first round. A lot of people that got it in the first round the majority haven't even opened yet,
Wow.
Or haven't solidified or gained the capital to move forward.
And you guys are open right now?
Not yet. We're looking to open up on Labor Day, but we starting construction next week.
Awesome. Wow. There's just so much red tape to get through to start with, but that social equity program really does at least allow in folks who were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs to get their first foot in the door. Yep. Because, let's talk about the prison population, not just in the US, but, just in New York, let's say. Somewhere close to 85% of the New York prison population is Black and Latino during the war on drugs. Just in New York, predominantly 7 different neighborhoods were essentially targeted, the Lower East Side being one of them. And it's like, if you had the foresight beforehand to be like, this is a substance that's in demand, I'm going to supply it to my fellow neighborhood stoners, to get yourself as one of the first people to really launch it in the city of New York is really something. That's an amazing achievement. So congratulations to you on it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
What is it like for you now that you're selling it legally? Is it more stressful? Is it less stressful? Are people still selling in suits? How are you doing it?
I'm not selling yet. I'm just marketing and trying to push the brand out, CONBUD, as much as I can. But it's unbelievable to be in this position, to be in the position where I once was incarcerated, judged for this, and now I could do this legally and not be scared, even though I'm, internally sometimes scared. I devoured so much trauma because of the plant, being illegal. I felt like I was carrying an atomic bomb in my pocket, and I had to hide, and be discreet and feel this nervousness every time I saw an NYPD officer. I mean, it still happens to me today where I'm like, I got a bag on me and I see, NYPD coming around and then I'm like, oh shit, it's legal. I could do this.
Yeah, that's just natural reaction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. As you're sort of moving along with the dispensary and things are starting to get on the shelves, does it feel more like this is really turning into a business, or do you still, in your mind, see it as I'm still your dealer? Come on in.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a business. It was a business back then, and it was a business now. And the difference is that I'm paying taxes. I think that's the only. And then I'll having a storefront to legally market it from there. But yeah, no, I mean it's wild to think that I'm going to be opening up in the Lower East Side in a couple months, and running the actual I have head of operations, different procurement managers and inventory managers, floor managers. We're looking to hire 50 employees to, manage space, 2 different shifts, 16 hours a day. It's going to be a pretty intense operation. And I'm not only just opening up the Lower East Side, I'm also opening up the Bronx. So we're opening up 2 stores within a couple weeks apart.
That's so cool. Let's talk about who you're looking for to work for you. You're trying to employ fellow formerly incarcerated people. I mean, they've certainly got the skills that you're looking for, right? Have you connected with anybody yet that's going to be on your team?
Yeah, so some of the employees that already work with me in the gym today are looking for part-time positions, whether it's delivery or being, I'm looking, I have a manager that, he's going to be doing inventory manager, procurement manager. My COO at CONBUD is going to be head of operations. I have my 2 partners in this venture is 2 of my cousins, basically, and one is a lawyer, and the other one is an entrepreneur, incredible entrepreneur, and is going to be a COO. But yeah, we've set up, I would say about out of the 50, we probably set up 15 to 20 jobs already of the individuals that we want to hire. And then, and they all been formerly incarcerated and been in the system. And that's our mission, is to hire as many people reintegrating back into society, looking for a viable employment. That's the goal. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it.
I'm excited to come down to New York and spend my money on companies that I support. And it's always going to be Black-owned companies owned by people of color. Anybody who's been in the legacy market. So yours will be my first stop as soon as you guys are open.
We're going to have that haze. I feel like New York, we build a relationship with a farmer that's going to be working and growing. This has been working and growing the haze for us. And we're going to be launching with Uptown Piff, then that's going to be something that no one has ever done in New York City yet, in New York State yet, coming from like straight legal stuff that supplied pretty much all New York City. I remember being arrested in Washington Heights because I'm going to buy some sour diesel or some real Boudet from Uptown, and I'm going to have that in the actual store because I built that relationship from real legacy dudes that have been out there for 30 years and build relationships and brought them up to farms so they can make that transition. And now it's going to be incredible, it's going to be, and it's going to be harvested just in time for when I open. So it's going to be awesome.
That's beautiful. I can't wait. I'm so excited to see how you guys do and how you grow. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, and best of luck with your opening.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
A big thanks to our guest, Coss Marte of CONBUD Dispensaries, soon to open in the Bronx and the Lower East Side. Next week, we'll be getting the lowdown from Different Leaf Magazine's travel and cannabis writers, Hannah, Mina, and Carly, on the must-see places to get high in Chicago, Portland, and San Francisco.
It's basically a bus tour that goes around to various sites you can consume on board. It's kind of, that Stony tour of Portland in a silly bus.
It's sort of a nod to the old Victorian age of San Francisco. It has these plush, dark reds and just has a bit of a more of a salon feel. And they also have a dispensary when you are up front.
The author of The Wizard of Oz was born and raised, lived in Chicago. So he's pretty well honored from the community and especially his neighborhood, which Oz Park is in. So it's just a normal park where you see like kids playing soccer games. There's dogs out, but they have really amazing sculptures of the characters of Wizard of Oz. So you could have a picnic next to like Dorothy or something like that.
And if you've had a gummy before that could be really enjoyable.
That's what I was thinking.
Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss next week's episode. Follow us on social media at Different Leaf, and I'm on social media at Brit the British. And make sure to check out our awesome new merch line at xdifferentleaf.com.